Okay, hello and good afternoon. Welcome to Cooper Gallery. So I'm Sophia Hao, and I'm a curator of exhibitions and the Visual Research Center at Duncan Jordanstone College of Art and Design. So I'm delighted to welcome you all here today at this special event of roundtable discussion as a part of our current exhibition, Anna Oppermann's work. So I'm sure this will be a very stimulating and a great gathering of minds in the stimulating company of Anna Oppermann's practice and thought. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce the chair of today's event, Dr. Lisa Otty, who's no stranger to Cooper Gallery. We have collaborated on many projects at the Cooper Gallery. Lisa was a co-editor of our gallery periodical and labels issue 4 on materiality and metaphysics. Lisa also co-curated the artist book exhibition last year. A book is a performance with me. So it's a fantastic, Lisa could work with me together again on this project. So I'm just going to briefly to introduce Lisa. So Dr. Lisa Otty is currently a research fellow at the AHRC-funded project at Edinburgh University called Palimpsest. I never can see this word, even I use this word in my own writing. Her research explores the relationship between literature, visual arts, and technology, and she has interest in critical theory, the archive in practice and theory, and the material culture. You probably already got a sense of why I've got Lisa here today. Between 2012 and 2013, Lisa was AHRC Early Career Fellow at the Center for the History of the Book at Edinburgh University. It's a very interesting research center. I'm sure many of you heard about it. And in 2012, Lisa was also visiting fellow at the Harry Ransom Center, University of Texas at Austin. And prior to that, Lisa was a postdoctoral research fellow at AHRC-funded projects Poetry Beyond the Text, Vision, Text, and Cognition at the University of Dundee. So before I hand you over to Lisa, I would really very much like to share a quote from Deleuze's seminal book, Difference and Reputation, which helped me to instigate this event. To think is to create. There's no other creation. But to create is, first of all, to engender thinking in thought. So now, with my great pleasure, I'm going to hand you over to Lisa. Thank you.
So thank you, Sophia, and thank you for inviting me to take part in the Cooper program. It's always a great pleasure because it's such an excellent program. And this afternoon promises to be an absolutely fascinating and stimulating discussion. I think we're very lucky to have a panel of extremely eminent speakers for our roundtable this afternoon. But as you may be aware, this event has been conceived not just to talk about Anna Oppermann's work, but also to respond to it and to elaborate and amplify the contexts and the histories of that work. So we're beginning this afternoon with readings, and then we'll have a short break, 5-minute break, and then we'll move on to the round table. That'll be about 45 minutes, this first section of the afternoon. I'd like to introduce our readers. Our first reader is going to be Alex Hetherington, and Alex is an artist and writer based in Edinburgh whose review of Cotoneaster, horizontalis was published on the online journal Aesthetica. He's going to be reading from that, and we hope that that will serve to open up some of the ideas in the exhibition and to really set the scene for the discussion later on this afternoon. Then we have 4 artist-writers. Some of you will perhaps be familiar with them already because all of these artist-writers have been, were a part of the writer's residency for studio jamming artist collaboration in Scotland this summer. I'm going to introduce them in their running order, and then I'm going to sit down and just let the readings proceed. So we have, after Alex Hetherington, Francis Davis reading Oppermann's Complexity and Calvino's Multiplicity for the Information Age. Then we'll have Richard Taylor reading his piece, Observer Singular. And then Kirsty Hendry reading Self-Storage. And finally, we'll have Catherine Street reading a piece that's authored with J.L. Williams titled The Practice of Being. Was there a handout for that one, Catherine?
I think we did print out the text. Yeah, if you want.
Okay, so there's one to collect if people would like it. And after that, we'll have a 5-minute break, as I say. So I would like to invite Alex, first of all, to take the floor.
I'll just read from here. Can you hear me? Is that okay? It's really difficult to work out if your voice is projecting. Just want to thank Sophia Howe and the Cooper Gallery for inviting me to write about Anna Oppermann, which is a really surprising, wonderful project. I'll just read my review. Also to thank Aesthetica for publishing me. Cooper Gallery Dundee showcases the first major exhibition in the UK of the work of preeminent German conceptual artist Anna Oppermann. Centering on one of her crowded ensembles completed in 1982, the show also catalogues her history through drawings, prints, gallery invites, Polaroids and documentary films, while an interactive archive forms an invitation to scrutinise through detailed annotations the intricate complexities of her practice. Cotoneaster horizontalis dominates the main gallery, staged as a corner piece in a gallery famed for having no corners. This floor-to-ceiling assembly features drawings, trompe l'oeil paintings, photographs, Polaroids, painted texts, and small handwritten notes. Scattered between these often propped-up texts and observations are dried roots, tree branches, and clay shapes. The aesthetics of the handmade and handwriting is a recurring motif, as is the evidence of its emotions and concerns. Thoughts are drawn out in haste, with force, her pencil hardly keeping up with her mind's pace. Elsewhere, like a signwriter, her poetic statements are drawn with precision and focus. These texts, often referencing German art, romanticism, and philosophical history. Deeper, towards the ensemble's background, are berries, bags of pencils, and white cotton sheets. Her shrine to perception is a display unit for the psyche. It is disordered, presenting its own associative logic. It is a bewitching and dense schematic laying bare the workings of the mind. Overlapping and repeating are photographs of public sculptures, Polaroids of incidental moments, photographed drawings, and photographs that are then sketched or drawn like memories. Each object and image surface mutating through sequences of perspective, form, and representation. Among this display are images of herself, and stills from TV of women who resemble her. The core of this analysis is unflinchingly self-inspecting. The gallery is carefully split, while the ensemble demonstrates her dense practice as an artist. A sequence of drawings on an opposite wall give dimension to her work as an academic and art school teacher. Describing the process of her engagement with art, education, and philosophy, these large-scale drawings read like a film storyboard. They narrate a creative process of minutiae and the theatrics, though nothing tussles to be centre stage. Display cases present ephemera, exhibition invites, essays and titles drawn across the artist's life, paradoxical intentions, and the artist's task to solve problems. Meanwhile, Polaroids and other personal artifacts capture an intensely glamorous woman. The artist is seen in beautiful dresses, parachute silk jumpsuits, heels and fur coats. A film from Documenta 1977, projected onto the black gallery wall, sees her discuss her processes to a beleaguered interviewer. She's intellectual, sensitive, sharp, nonchalant, and melancholy, while her golden glitter eyelashes, flickering like a beacon, suggest her individualism, elegance, and far-sighted progressive vision.
Somewhere in this world, complexity must still be valued. This is a phrase attributed to Anna Oppermann that I came across in reading around her work and practice in preparation for the event today. And the following short reading takes Oppermann's conception and enactment of complexity as its starting point and situates it in proximity to Italo Calvino's writing on multiplicity from his 6 Memos for the New Millennium. In our contemporary era, characterized by a continuous and seemingly instantaneous flow and exchange of information through dense networks, a consideration of complexity is apt. If, as Oppermann implores, complexity must be valued, then we must first ask both what its value is and how we might value it. Written within a few years of Oppermann making Cotoneaster horizontalis, Italo Calvino's 6 memos for the new millennium outlines 6 values of literature which Calvino felt would be important for the coming millennium, the millennium we now find ourselves in. In his 5th text, and the final text to be completed before his death, Calvino addresses multiplicity. Calvino suggests that we can no longer think in terms of a totality that is not potential, conjectural, and manifold, and posits the idea of an open encyclopedia, a method of knowledge and a network of connections between, in his words, the events, the people, and the things of the world. While traditionally and etymologically the encyclopedia attempts to enclose all knowledge, Calvino's open encyclopedia offers a new model, a complex and continuous whole, a confluence of discrete components that together form some composite truth of meaning. In concluding, he offers up the potential he perceives in this form and in embracing multiplicity as method. Someone might object that the more the work tends towards the multiplication of possibilities, the further it departs from that unicum which is the self of the writer, his inner sincerity and the discovery of his own truth. But I would answer, who are we? Who is each one of us, if not a combinatoria of experiences, information, books we have read, things imagined? Each life is an encyclopedia, a library, an inventory of objects, a series of styles, and everything can be constantly shuffled and reordered in every way conceivable. But perhaps the answer that stands closest to my heart is something else. Think what it would be to have a work conceived from outside the self, a work that would let us escape the limited perspective of the individual ego, not only to enter into selves like our own, but to give speech to that which has no language, to the bird perching on the edge of the gutter, to the tree in spring and the tree in fall, to stone, to cement, to plastic. Or, to return to Oppermann, perhaps here in Calvino's open encyclopedia, as in Oppermann's ensembles, we find both the value of complexity and a method through which it might be valued, a way of thinking and of making that reflects the multiplicity and complexity of the contemporary moment and moves beyond the singular perspective to something larger than its whole.
I am reminded of a very light touch made on the work of an artist I fail to. A process made to link. The tableau, it fails to be viewed from one point and is all-sided. Setups that are precarious and destroyed when encountered, discussed, read, or seen. The marionette dance from Escape to Witch Mountain was rendered squirming and tagged to ripped sound from YouTube videos of Peking opera. A collection of opera masks, small, ceramic, entirely breakable. One falls to the floor, breaks, ceramic, small, ends up pushed into a body of unfired clay, along with fake pearls and floral wrapping. Drenched in clove oil, the encounter, it was ritualistic. Observer, singular. They were surely eating the delicacy whilst ritualizing times gone by, a rare treat filling the expanse made by years of different cuts, fried, baked, and pressure cooked. They took it from the newspaper wrapping and ate it raw in their living room, on the patterned carpet, with the television buzzing fuzzy documentaries behind, a frame for their delicate consuming. Was less than 7 years old and quite small. They thought he could not see, but it was gorgeous for him to observe the light from the screen play on the ridged, silver-white meat as it unfolded from his great-aunt's hands. Never met her husband, his great-uncle who died before he was born, but photographs did provide evidence of his looks, and his name was Thomas. This guy, the tripe guy, he seemed familiar. He had a name that made think of cigars. The tripe did not smell. Had bathed and could only detect soap residue and talc under his nightgown. Now his clean skin stretched to see how long the stomach lining really was. Elongated to watch the ritual, witnessed their smart living room enjoyment. The cigar man must have found it, the meat, at a specialist store. It's quite rare to get your hands on. In fact, it's pretty much extinct. No one under the age of 40 has much experience of it. The next day, Violet and cigar man, aka Sid, his great-aunt preferred Vi instead of Violet, would take to the museum to study fossils, but first they would fill their bellies. His toes started to feel cold. Timber, now cut with goggles on face. Cat wears perfect yellow rims to surround bottomless black pools that switch to slits next to the fire. The room fills with heat as each block of wood takes its place. The hearth offers depth from which to gather warmth, and its gold trim provides support for the cat's head. Her eyes meet mine as I copy her posture to bask the same way she does amongst the wave of energy which happily meanders against skin or fur. This position, however momentary, is respite from a blanket of writing about another place. Gullen sands, wind, surf, timber, soaked in sea foam, bright skies, bitter cold. To move forward now would be to burn, a reduction of hands to smouldering lumps unhinged from use. To retreat back is the only option. Back to shadow, back to cloth, back to the story of elsewhere. A sculpture made by Taylor, featuring a broken ceramic opera mask, sits on the mantelpiece in Strong's front room. This location is very specific, but the delivery of the sculpture was not so. Taylor had an imperfect memory of the location of Strong's house, and the sculpture was first deposited in a neighbouring back garden. After realising his mistake, Taylor broke into this garden again, retrieved the piece, found the correct location, and proceeded to jump the wall into Strong's driveway. He reached the back garden only to be highlighted by the security light, a perfect illumination for the heavy yet small mass to be placed carefully on the patio. I am reminded of a very light touch made by the work of an artist called
the structural and systemic conflation of being and body, falsely pinned down by the perceived solipsism of being a body, as if being a body isn't political, as if being a body can ever be an individualistic pursuit, as if I must always be confessional. For anything afflicted with such a filthy pronoun could never have socio-political resonance. The personal, performed politics of gesture is not a quantifiable data set, and as such, a useful tool for ingraining capital P politics as something happening elsewhere, beyond any body, but through the sprawling and expanded bodies of power. Corpulent forms grossly inflect the shape of social structures. their dominance derived from their agency to define and thereby confine others corporeally. Ever suspecting of pseudonyms, anonymity, guises, for identity is useful collateral. Be yourself becomes a soft command that is both effective and linguistic, as if a knowing presentation of self can ever be authentic. Through a veneer of protecting and advocating authenticity, their carefully curated norms duplicitously govern the production of a subject. For the production of subjectivity is a lucrative commodity for the attention economy. In the fallacious pursuit of authenticity, meaning is contingent on the complicity and coercion of time-sharing. Recognizing a piece of reality is engendering a piece of reality. The body is resistant to these forms of templating. It distends its own edges by the very fact that it is incapable of rendering its own parameters. Its edges drawn by the spatial temporal matrix that it can only ever fleetingly occupy. Body, bodies, greater than symbol, body, lesser than symbol, the perspectival construction of space. A future self, enmeshed in textual anatomy. Placed into abyss, the body is not conductor, but aggregate accumulation, a templum that reveals a social and political shape, not total embodiment, but captured dismemberment. Self-regulation. Reassembled, it defeatedly gestures, I am this thing, estranged by its own recursive entanglement of simultaneous resemblance and dissimilarity. The consumption and regurgitation of narration serves to unbind the confessional I, admonishing its demands for urgent smoothness. Untethered from the individual accountability that the market so desired, in its place stands a reconstituted public I, for any body can masquerade as I. This public I co-opts the structures that were intended to govern it. I becomes an algorithmic aggregator concealed within a generic pronoun, through which collective public consciousness is performed. A roaming vector of selfhood.
I could breathe quietly and slowly, dreaming as if the home was the only real place where the women sat at the dining table shamed and dreaming, their hands white birds in the room, their lips red buds, red purses closed shut tight as the men rubbed one another with sweetened oils, and the slaves walked back and forth carrying glass jugs of wine, and the poet stood in the corner of the room declaiming that the rich are too rich and the poor are too poor, and the entire structure is about to collapse.
Coziness of the cotton around, as steam burst through the window open with the guttural sound of the broken boiler in the pub below. And later, an erotic train of thought, but perhaps that leads to a kind of non-thought in the end. Many practices require the suppression of concentration in some ways, to stop at a full stop.
We have to find a new way to process it. Is for the dog to say what comes next, and his nose is on the bone. Some sleep calls for more sleep, some for waking, and this time talking is the only option. When the door closes, the small lines on the floor become apparent, and the smell of melons in the room, the drape of the carpet on the sofa, the listing and cataloging of many beings. Sometimes the memories flood in, and all the mistakes, and I wonder at the notions of good and bad when
a cooling
reading
tower
what there
in
is.
Germany, or a Chinese oil platform. something that's not immediately in front of our eyes, can be attended to by realism. But can all things lend themselves? Can I be in a talk about realism? Can I think about realism and these bubbles of existence sprout out and float up into a documentary eye that blinks sticky? She said it's not enough. What you do isn't enough, and you're not enough for me. You have an iridescent surface of a sphere or those balloons that straddle across the ocean.
Dig deeper into the soil of the mind, the hot white
where a
flesh you
better
smell
life
intoxicates
awaits.
the fornicator. Unless my heart dries from shedding too many hearthstones in the night, I will dig until the center is reached. When you were a minute, when did space relent? I saw a black dog with his nose in the air. The space between men is non-existent. We want to relent. We hope for nothing. There is nothing but the present moment. It is so strange to realize the capacity of being
as a
when
young
you step
child, maybe
outside
10
of.
years old, he stood gaunt, mysteriously but purposefully striding across the grass towards us, with white lips and taut hands in pockets. He stood there, curiously light and solid, whilst another figure faded into the background. Figure and ground. That was something that I read
Gutted
yesterday
fried,
about
the
a pyramid
culmination
with a
of
top
cities, the
that
slow
glitters
movement of
bright
cities toward
against.
airlessness, the hiving of men into cells, the strange desire for folding into one another, the odd terror of space in which the only isolation of the self becomes apparent, the driving force of space, the dust in the eye, the slow decay of cities. I imagine the city imploding in a slow, silent gold-silver burst, the way a star would, chewing its own skin off from the inside out, the only moral hook to hang your coat on before the burning begins.
Wits about you and flitting. Tip towards the surface and angle, you are everything in the world that's happened so far. And tip, restrict, aim for distinct. Distance and fragmenting plates join together. You are every event as it unfolds. Untold and unfurled, resounding delight. An escape from representation, just let it open out. Sounds are shared wholly more than the image in front of us. Tip light and quick, move faster than the dead tonight.
You walked with your eyes open and unseen, trusting to the space in front of you, trusting that no beast would attack and no branch would grab, and in the distance you could hear the sighing of a river, and as you walked through the utter dark, the cold breath of the blackest night kissed your eyes and your cheeks and your lips and your forehead and your neck and your hands, and you walked unafraid, and somewhere in the distance you could hear hooves crushing
a diversion
leaves.
tactic. Rung, same, span, lake. Keeping bare and scraped down, I can adopt a minimal way of staying here. I wish you were doing something more worthwhile, he said. A straight line of being here is just a case of not going away. Upside, flat, down, dark and spun. Late at night till morning, always hanging on, until light spreads and keeps. Keep busy and don't think too much. Stop to begin, end to start. In the vast change of day, it comes as before. I wish you were doing something a little bit more worthwhile. Write more slowly now to fill the time. Only 15 seconds to go. Now 8, now 4, now 1.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you all of our readers for a series of readings that I think responded to Oppermann's paratactical method in various diverse ways and opened up questions about, for me at least, the complexity of thought and communication and the limits of the self and the practice of being. So I hope we'll unpack some of those ideas further in our discussion.